What is up, guys? Wraec is here with a new video, and today we want to talk about the tree of origin of FQV Vesa. And to start all this off, I thought let's have a little look at FQV Vesa in combat with some sublimations. And I thought VC120 Realms Gate would still be a nice way to show it. Currently still have my Star Expedition set up in place, so my EOS doesn't have any imprints, but of course my FQV Vesa, being an A tier, is going to destroy here. Some things to note: my heroes are pretty much at full shields all the time because of her sheer size and power, and gain a lot of different buffs, which we will have a look at in a few seconds after this wonderful fight here. You can see even the E5 armor and the E5 homes are surviving fairly well. On top, currently using the Starving Jara core here, not the FQV Vesa core. We will look into it later why this is maybe not that much of a good core for PvP, and really also not PvE, except the exception being SL Forest, of course, at that. So, finishing this up here. Nice damage from the FQV Vesa. And let's have a look at FQV Vesa, at her skills, at her gear set. Basically, the Tree of Roots is very much centered around keeping your team alive and giving them buffs, mostly of a defensive nature. So her kit basically is geared towards supporting, but still, also as a Transcendence hero, she has a decent chunk of damage. And that already gets clear if you have a look at her active skill. The active skill is basically the same. Basically, she attacks the enemies 4 times. And for each layer of Newborn Radiance, which is a skill effect, a layered buff that she gives herself, she launches 1 more attack at any enemies, random which enemy she chooses. And each attack deals 1800% of damage. And this is already the first change. In the V4 version it was 1600% of attack damage. The change here being rather small. We saw like 25% or even higher changes when we analyzed the other heroes. Here it is only 200% additional attack damage, really. And that's not a whole lot, but if you consider that you have the Newborn Radiance buff and this active skill really starts scaling in the later rounds, the more actives she does, the more Newborn Radiance, the more hits she can do. And if you check the last part of the active, it actually says that every layer of Newborn Radiance lasts for 8 rounds. So we can get like 8 additional attacks here, up to 12 attacks with Newborn Radiance. For a grand total of, what is it, 21,600% of attack damage with a single active skill. So it gets quite nuts in the end, and giving her a lower buff actually at the beginning seems quite reasonable to me. Then we have the heal part. She restores all allies HP equal to 720% of attack now. It was 600 before, so a decent buff to the healing. And we get the same shield for 100% of healing, which we already had before. So that's quite nice as well. They also changed the Newborn Radiance buff. It gives her a healing effect. It was 15%, now it's 18%. 20% buff in line with other buffs we have seen before. So that's quite nice, and will make it easier for lower home owner FQV Vesas to heal the full team. So for the active skill, those are all pretty nice buffs, and I think quite reasonable at that. For the sublimations now, the first one is already a pretty big one in my opinion. Increases its skill damage by 270%. Usually not quite the fan of skill damage. Skill damage doesn't scale that great into the active skills, as the Transcendence heroes already have such huge numbers, 1800%, that puny numbers like on the stones, for example, where you have like 60% skill damage, don't play any role Also, there's a lot of misconception regarding skill damage. I saw some people say that if you have like 120% of skill damage, then you can basically add 120% of the attack value on top, giving you over 3000% of attack. This is really not the case. That's just added on top. So if you have like the 270%, it's 2070% afterwards. So it's a nice buff, but it's not that huge as some people think. So still a decent one. I like it. I was pretty happy to get 270% of skill damage, and would recommend going for it, especially if you want to use Wraec Investor as main damage dealer in the teams like the one I showed before, for example. Then we have increased the healing received by all allies by 15% with less than 50% HP. It's quite nice if your team gets hit quite low in, let's say, for example, Forest SL. If you haven't seen that yesterday, no, the day before. Yesterday I didn't post anything. The day before I posted my Forest SO30 clear, and there it is very crucial to heal the allies that are under 50% of HP, so they don't get killed by dot. And this helps doing that, so it's quite a great skill, quite good skill for a healer to heal low life allies, so nice one, can definitely use that. The last one is one I particularly like. When an ally is being healed, increases their armor by 33% for 3 rounds. So basically every time she heals an ally, the armor gets buffed. And having such a nice skill, the ability to buff the armor by 33% very early on in the fight is especially great in Forest SL, and it was one of the reasons why it was a lot easier in my video than it was before, and we could clear it fairly easy with the right setup. So this one definitely good, will give your team a good damage reduction and make it easier to survive for it against the enemy. Now over to the next skill, that's actually the Healing Oracle. The Healing Oracle is the passive skill that adjusts the basic attack. We again see the 1800% of attack damage value that we saw in the active skill. Was also 1600% before. We attack the enemy with the highest attack skill still, and reduce the all damage dealt now by 35%, which was formerly 30%. Quite a nice skill in PvE modes as well. If you are like in Star Expedition, for example, and your Vessel does a basic skill, you have 1 round with 35% less damage that you're going to take, so that's quite great. And I like to use that as well. Then we have a heal, and again the same values as in the active skill, a buff from 600% to 720% that she heals for the 3 allies with the lowest HP. And afterwards we get a shield by 100% of healing, which was the same as before. So really we don't have that many changes here, and the changes we have are in line with what was done for the active skill. Though I have to say, the basic doesn't scale as much as the active scale. The active scale, we talked about, it has the additional hits from U1 Radiance, so I considered the lower buff they did here quite alright. This isn't the same for the basic skill. In my opinion, they could have done more than the buff from 200% from 1600 to 1800%. I would have found it quite reasonable to make it 2000% at that. Otherwise, the reduce all damage dealt by 35% is quite a great skill, and this is a reasonably good basic skill, so not much to complain here. We have a precision buff by 40%. We looked at it earlier. The precision is actually not added to the hero itself. It just seems to apply when she uses the basic skill, which is quite strange. But you won't find the precision when you check your hero stats. Then we have deep sublimation. Well, before we go into that, this is of course questionable if this is even intended, because I can't imagine that it's just precision for the basic skill. I think this is meant to give you precision, but it currently doesn't. So maybe they fix that, maybe they change it, we don't know. we'll see in the future. Then we have the deep sublimation, increase the shield strength by 15% for allies with more than 50% of HP. It's quite interesting, actually. The Age seems to think you use Vesa with like an A and B, because this makes sense to buff the shield strength, to give the allies a huge shield on round 1 without having energy on the Vesa, and then on round 2, when your allies got a few hits in, having the healing received buffed through this sublimation. Is basically the cost they think we take in the fight. Which of course wasn't the tactic I used in Forest SL. In Forest SL I used the melodic strings on Vesa, so we had the active skill on turn 1, couldn't profit from this sublimation, and later the basic skill and couldn't profit from this sublimation because we had our allies below 50% of HP. Well, not all of them. We didn't take that much damage, but in that case, we actually needed it the other way around. But Farrakhan Vesa was played a lot with the A and B, and this makes sense to have it this way for this particular playstyle with an A and B. So quite the okay skill at that. And then we have the last one. Additionally reduces the target's crit damage by 20% for 2 rounds, which is in line with the other reduced all damage dealt. So we get reduced all damage dealt and reduced crit damage. So quite a lot less damage dealing capabilities by the enemy that gets hit with this basic skill. Quite the okay buffs for the basic skill, nothing too impressive I have to say, but it's alright. Can't really complain. Then we have the Holy Incarnation. The Holy Incarnation was one I actually had to look at twice. I looked at it and thought like, didn't they change nothing? What did they change? Until I noticed that they added a completely new line here, and basically the skill is the same until here, until the 4-1 round, and usually it ends there, and they added and restores the ally HP equal to 500% of Fairy Queen Vesa's attack. This is of course a little imprecise wording. Restores the allies HP. Which ally is it? Is it the one that is the lowest life? Is it the one that gets the Blessing of Purity? I think it is. If it was all allies, it would be quite cool. For the one hero that gets Blessing of Purity and is formerly the lowest life hero, I don't know if it's quite that great actually. Because I like the idea of combining the lowest life hero with the Blessing of Purity buff. If you have the correct hero, if you have like Sherlock basically, it's a bit off meta. Correct, but that's if you can get like a Sherlock and you can get Blessing of Purity on him, and Sherlock can't get crit anymore, that's quite great. But this can easily change the lowest life hero now. If you get like a 500% of Vesa attack heal on the hero, and you have a Vesa like mine that's 35 million heal, that can easily change the lowest life hero and makes the hero that just got Blessing of Purity no longer be the lowest life hero. So not sure I actually like that. This could actually make the skill itself weaker. Then again, some heal can be quite great, and in PvE it's of course a good skill. Let's check this out. It's basic stat buff, nothing to analyze here, it's nice. Then we have deep sublimation, and this is really one that made me reconsider and say, maybe it's worth unlocking this just for this alone. There's a 25% chance to additionally grant Blessing of Purity for one ally. And this is quite great. It of course doesn't say which ally this gets, if it's the second lowest life or it's just one random ally. For the sake of this video we will assume it's the one random ally. We can't test it yet. But imagine like this. If you hit this 25% chance, then you have Farrakhan Vesa, which has Blessing of Purity. Gains it from the first sentence here. You have the lowest life hero that has Blessing of Purity, and you have one additional hero that has Blessing of Purity. And what Blessing of Purity does? 100% less chance to take crit damage. Basically, they can't get crit. So if you hit this 25% chance, half of your team can't take crit damage. And this is insane. This is such a high amount of damage reduction against a lot of teams. Basically every team. Most teams run crit damage imprints on their Transcendence heroes. So making half of the team immune against crit damage, or making them just take normal damage at that, is a huge buff and a lot of damage reduction actually, and will be quite nice to unlock that in the future, and might even be meta changing, though of course not against the new burst CC teams. Those are just OP and probably won't care too much about this. And then we have the last one. Additionally increases the target's dot reduction by 30% for 1 round when granting Blessing of Purity. And I thought this was quite cool, because Forest SL is notorious for having a lot of dot. But I didn't have it now for the Forest SL30 fight. And looking at it now, I think it's too specific. Dot doesn't play a huge role in most game modes, maybe a bit in PvE, where it will of course be nice to have some dot reduction. It's not a bad effect at that, but for PvP that's really nothing. It's worth nothing. So a little bit on the weaker side, but still a valid option, a valid skill. And something that will be good to unlock and will make your team overall stronger, especially in PvE against Valkyries in like Void Campaign or something. And then we go to the last one, the Melody of Nature. During the battle, when Feruchine Vessa's HP is lower than 50%, she heals herself, removes all debuffs, including CC that is on her, and restores herself HP to 100%. Which is the same as in the V4 version, and then she increases all allies' precision by 50% and attack by 24%. These were 40% and 20% before respectively, and she does that for 6 rounds. So we get a huge precision buff, we get a huge attack buff, and this for 6 rounds, so for a super long time. Really great, really like that. Was a great skill before, and now with bigger buffs it's even better. And then we have, whenever an ally dies, she has a 70%, it was 60% before, chance to inflict silence gag order to all enemies for 1 round. So we get a bit more control precision here, which is quite good, and will make the enemy more likely to take silence gag order, which is a nice CC effect. It's actually the buffed version of silence, and not only does this block the enemies from using their active skills, but it also stops them from critting. So basically, Vessa has a lot of crit suppression in her kit, which makes her quite strong. And especially at the time when she was released, you have to keep in mind that Vessa was released around the time when SFX was godly. It was like you only had Elora, you had SFX, and you had like and Vessa was just coming up, and SFX was dominating with huge crits, and suddenly the lowest life hero that is attacked by SFX could no longer get crit, which was of course not a minor blow, it was a major blow. I would say didn't push her out of the meta. SFX is still strong enough to do a lot of damage even without critting. But people had to think about if it was actually worth using crit damage on SFX, or if you instead wanted to run something like Holy Damage Precision, which of course was a lot less possible damage, but against an Feruchine Vessa potentially a lot more than using crit imprints. For the Sublimations, we get another stat buff. Then we get, when it is triggered, self additionally gains a shield equal to 20% of the restoration amount, which is again not precise wording. I would reckon this is in regard to the first part of the skill. So basically, when her life is lower than 50% for the first time, she will not only heal herself to full HP, but will also receive a shield equal to 20% of the restoration amount. Which is quite a lot, which is quite a good skill, and basically makes her more tanky, so definitely a good one. And then we have the last one, increases the duration of silence gag order to 2 rounds. This is quite nice, because it will actually make double CCing with her more viable. And it's not really something you would go for intentionally in PvE, but more than often you have like one of your heroes dying, let's say to avoid campaign wave with SFX in the enemy team, and one of your heroes dies, and usually you would get some silence on the enemy, but you couldn't double CC with that, because at the end of the round silence ends, the other CC effect gets purified, and the enemy breaks out and kills you. With that you can. With that you actually can, because it is 2 rounds, so it's still a valid CC effect even in the next round. And I think it's a good buff, and I will gladly take it and put it on my hero as soon as I have enough Sublimation Essence, of course, to unlock all of this. Because right now I basically only have the first 2 branches of the tree with the active and the basic skill unlocked, and have unlocked an additional branch on another hero for the active skill, and didn't go that far to unlock the 3rd and 4th branch on my Wraec Investor as well, because it felt like a little bit of an overcommitment to go that deep into her. The last part is the core. I actually used the core. I have the basic variant of the core. I thought it would be quite a nice thing to get the core for the Forest SL. Was basically the only thing I wanted to use it for, but it was also my first core, so I tried it a bit in PvP, and the results were quite interesting. I tried it in my free team-up arena fights on my server, and basically I didn't use a very tanky team. I had Snow Hearts on my team, I had some Demon Belts, stuff like that, not really something like Crown, and still the heals would make it impossible for weaker players to even kill one hero on my team, and this was quite fun. Even though if you want a core for PvP, it is currently 100% the best choice to go for the Starwing Jar core, because really nothing beats that at the moment in PvP. But this is a fun choice, it's quite cool, and from my experience in Forest SL, it helps you to clear it with worse copies. Because before you needed like B tier pandas or something like that with like huge HP pools, and what this basically does is it takes the first hit your hero takes and just recovers it. And the hero will recover to full life, has a chance to clear the debuff, like in Forest SL that could be a healing effect debuff. This one will be removed, and your hero will have full life and a shield, which makes him able to take like an additional hit. And suddenly the effective HP, especially on the first round, is a lot higher on the heroes. And the first round can be quite crucial in Forest SL, because in Forest SL you use pandas, and pandas need a little bit of time to scale their buffs. So having this core to upgrade their effective HP on the first round can actually be a huge thing. Of course, you have to consider if you want to take a core that you probably won't use in other game modes just to have an easier time in Forest SL, but I reckon with more and more time going in, we will have easier access to cores, and later on I think this is really an option to get at least one core for Wraec Investor and use this in Forest SL, and you will have a much easier time at that. But didn't explain what the core does. Actually, we should do that. Basically, it's the fourth passive of Vesa put into the core and made available for the teammate. So as soon as a hero hits under 50% of HP, the hero gets healed by 600% of Wraec Investor's attack, and is granted a shield equal to 50% of the healing amount, and then the debuffs are cleared. And then we have basically a very long secondary effect. This effect can only be triggered once for each aligned battle, so it's really just a turn 1 thing. Afterwards you will likely have all your heroes triggered in Forest SL. And if you trigger this 5 times, so basically means on all other heroes in battle, then you will inflict Silence Gag Order, which we've talked before, on all enemies for 2 rounds with a 50% chance. The second part never really played a role, to be honest, even though I imagine it would be quite nice to silence the enemies in like Forest SL or even in PvP and hinder them from critting. Then again, the heroes in Forest SL can't crit. They don't have a crit chance, but at least they can't use their active skill, so that's something. The first part is pretty good. It's a lot of heal, and 600% doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a big heal. It is really a big heal, even from the hero tab stats with the 6 million or 7 million HP. Vesa, you can imagine that this is quite a big heal, and I was hitting healing stats of like 2.4 trillion in regular PvP fights. So, what do I think of Vesa? In my opinion, the buffs they gave her are quite reasonable. Not too much, in my opinion. They're really more on the lower side. But they make Vesa a very good hero to go for Forest SL. They make Vesa a very good hero for PvE in general, and a very strong contender to clear your first SL29, SL30. And SL29 on that note, actually a teammate, a guildmate of mine, managed to clear SL29 Forest without an AT hero. So that will be something we will look at. And with that, guys, I want to end the video, and I wish you a great day, and we will see us in the next one.